Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sparing Partners. I'm Monica Paulini, your host, and with me today I have Caroline Chappelle. She is the founder of CC Squared. After being an analyst at countless outfits before, and so she's another independent analyst, and it's always a pleasure to talk to someone who's doing somewhat similar, but obviously focusing on something specific topics. And today we're going to talk about how the increasing uncertainty, complexity of our networks, geopolitical tensions, the introduction of AI, quantum, are all changing in a fundamental way how we should approach security. Security becomes a bigger issue or a different issue that we need to tackle differently. And what we're going to talk about today is that is this clearly is a need, it's a requirement. We need security is not negotiable, but also it is a potential to create new revenues, new services. How is that going to turn out? So this is our conversation today. And Caroline, welcome. I wanted to have you on the podcast for a long time. So finally we made it. So that's great.
Indeed. Thank you very much for having me, Monica. It's a real pleasure to be here. So yes, I'm Caroline Chappell, and I founded CC Squared really to look at the big picture of where networks are going in the future. And in fact, the telco industry, obviously. So yes, it's great to talk about this topic, and I think it's a very timely one as well. I mean, only yesterday, the head of the UK's GCHQ talked about us being in a new era of radical uncertainty, and I think it is a big. Well, it's both a threat for telcos as critical infrastructure providers. I mean, they're massive targets. We only need to look at what's happening with submarine cables to see that. But also, I believe personally that it's also an opportunity, a revenue generating opportunity for them. But yeah, so yeah, it'd be a great conversation, I think, Monica.
Yeah, so let's get started. Actually, you mentioned submarine cables. I mean, it's not like nothing new, but what is new is how damage is being done on purpose. So a lot of the stuff is nothing particularly new, but it just becomes more of an issue because, as I say, communication, the infrastructure is much more essential than it was before. And because, especially with AI automation, you have much more, you increase the number of vulnerabilities. So it's just like, so why don't you, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction? What is different? What's going on? And what worries you and makes you think that there's something here that we should be, it's a possible, interesting opportunity from creating new revenues?
Yeah, so I think there's an awful lot going on. I mean, I think it's both geopolitical and technological, and I think that's where this uncertainty comes from. It's really the convergence of both, because as you say, AI amplifies that. There've always been bad actors, but now we've got AI-enabled bad actors. And I think, there's been a lot of focus on the existential threat from AI, if it becomes artificial general intelligence. But actually, there's an awful lot of AI, or just, that's not yet, generally intelligent, whether that's going into drone warfare, whether it's being used to control populations, whether it's it was the subject of a spat recently between the US Department of Defense and Anthropic over the use of their models. So there's the whole sort of AI issue, and I think you're right. That's really at the root of a lot of it, and it is actually causing. It's difficult to pull out what's cause and what's effect of the geopolitical situation, but a lot of it you could say is being amplified by AI. but I think what's different for me is that since COVID, there's been a recognition that networks are critical infrastructure. I mean, obviously, certain segments of the population have long known that, but including us. But you know, I don't think there was a general recognition of that. And I was talking to you earlier about the fact that I wrote back in the 1990s one of the very first analyst reports on the internet security, and I looked at the security measures that were being brought out at that time. Public key infrastructure was something that was really sort of growing in importance. A lot of DDoS, anti-DDoS attack stuff. A lot of the security companies we see today had their origins back then in the 1990s. And I did this forecast looking at what would a company need to, which was based on fundamentally what would you need to pay in order to get internet security from threats on the internet. And I looked at my end result and I thought nobody's ever going to pay that percentage of their IT budget on internet security. So I scaled it right back, and lo and behold, you know, all the vulnerabilities that we know about today have come to pass, because you know, getting that kind of people took risk, you know, took that risk management very, very with a pinch of salt, and they did risk management, and they thought, you know, well, we don't think that there are that many vulnerabilities that we're going to have to guard against. So, but I think what's different today is this combination of knowing that, you know, a really feeling that the networking connectivity is critical infrastructure, and then understanding that those vulnerabilities are causing real pain, and they're accelerating. The attacks are accelerating again because of AI. So I think because of that, I would say that there's probably I think there's a heightened opportunity for telcos to pay to create some kind of resilience premium for their customers, premium services. And I think we're already starting to see that around things like sovereign cloud and around things like post-quantum cryptography and quantum safe networking. There's the beginnings of those markets developing, and these will not be business as usual, you know, markets where you just expect those to be part of the networking fabric. No, these will be where telcos can potentially charge and charge well for what are, in fact, you know, sort of premium resilience services.
Yes, and but at the same time, it's really hard to sell security, because you're buying something. It's a protection, it's just insurance, right? So sort of more conservative view is like, well, you know, it's much better to invest in something that it has higher visibility if I'm, you know, doing it. And I remember talking to operators, they would say, you know, it's easier for us to get budget to invest into something that you deploy and you can make a PR announcement on it, rather than security, which you typically don't. So the question is that I have is that clearly security is absolutely crucial and non-negotiable. However, from an operator point of view, isn't that something that they need to provide as a sort of baseline, so that security is not an add-on, it's just basic, and they need to provide it to everybody? And I guess that there is some part of it that you need to provide a minimum of security anyway. And then the question is, are we doing enough there? And then if you have a service that you can charge for, how can you get around and make it look like it's something that you provide? It's not just more security, it's a service that delivers you a tangible and visible benefit, so that it's easier to say, well, we're going to spend that much money if you're the enterprise or the customer.
Yeah, and I think I think there are three, you put across three different questions. One is, is there, I think there's a certain level of security we do expect in our networks. And last week, I think it was last week, I attended a very interesting webinar from Cloudflare, which operates a massive CDN network, as you know, and they are building post-quantum cryptography into their network. So that will be, and they see that as a differentiator. So at the very least, you've got to have something like that as a differentiator, which I think comes to your second point, which is, are we doing enough? Because the reason Cloudflare said that they were doing this, putting post-quantum cryptography into their networks as a native capability, not as a chargeable capability, but as a native capability, was because they were being pushed by Google, which was getting very antsy about what's been called Q-Day, which is the date when network security is going to be cracked by quantum computers. And people were thinking, well, I mean, functioning quantum computers are unlikely to be available till the 2030s. But Q-Day has been brought forward to 2030 because there's a 10% chance that there may be that capability by then. And what Cloudflare was pointing out is there's been a lot of emphasis in the market on harvest data now, decrypt later, stealing data. I remember someone from BT Labs, taking a piece of optical fiber, bending it, saying, "Can you see all that light leaking out? That's data." That's how easy it is to get to tap data from an optical network, and so if you've got that harvest, this is what again all the emphasis is on. But Cloudflare points out that actually what's at stake is access control, is authentication, because everything from software updates to APIs need access control, need to be authenticated through certificates. And the certificates are, they're keys. They're cryptographic. They're protected by cryptographic keys. And if you can crack those cryptographic keys, then you basically destroy the whole of authentication across the internet. So this is why they're putting it in place. Pushed by Google. So that is a fundamental level of security, which are other operators doing enough to put that in place? I think that's got to come faster and probably has got to come faster. There are quite a few operators looking at this at the moment. And then there's a step beyond that, which is the quantum key distribution, which is the actual photonic, based on physics, that kind of cryptography. That's far more expensive, and that's likely to be the one that's a premium service. Because it's 100% uncrackable. PQC, the thing that the technology Cloudflare is putting in place, well, it's maths based. So that'll be an arms race as to who can crack the next levels of it. But all this takes money, and it's costs it's investment that telcos have got to make that decision. What do they charge for, and what don't they? I think that. I think there is an inflection point. I think there is, enterprises themselves are going to have to step up and pay more for security. Perhaps we do as consumers as well have to step up and pay more, even because I think there is an awareness of security, awareness of threat that there simply hasn't been at this level before.
Yeah, and one way to think about it is that security obviously is always an issue. So at home you have security, you put a lock and whatever. So we're used to spend money for security,
that's right,
or insurance or whatever.
Mm.
And maybe one way to look at it is that instead of, and so enterprises have been spending on security, but maybe it was more on the at a different level, but now they might need to shift their budget to go from whatever they're spending it right now to pay the operator, because it becomes network specific, or maybe not. I don't know. I mean, that's what I would like to see what you think about it, because whenever you say, well, we're going to get new revenues, those revenues need to come from somewhere else. So somebody has to say, okay, instead of buying this, I buy that. Or you need to kind of get the money from somewhere. So I wonder whether now it might become more network specific, or maybe it's the other way around. So are you protecting the data at the network level or at the application level? Because then the way you'd invest the budget and who is going to benefit is going to be different.
I think what you've put your finger on, Monica, is something really, really interesting, because it is the way companies and operators themselves think about things. They think about things in a very, very fragmented, specific way. Are we talking about data? Are we talking about networks? Are we talking about applications? Are we talking about operating systems, cloud? And different people are responsible for all those different pieces. And I guess my sense, and what I would quite like, I think if you're going to maximize this opportunity as an operator, is to stop thinking about this as a set of discrete services, a discrete, and have a much more sort of platform view of this. This is about providing, I don't know what you call it, because business continuity, resilience, these kinds of, they have very specific meanings. We need to broaden this out. We need to get to approach customers and say, you've got to have a very holistic strategy. And it's not just your CISO who's going to be dealing with this. This is not just a security issue. This is a board level, existential threat view of things. And therefore, you've got to sort of think about data and connectivity and the platform you're running on, the platforms, public cloud, private cloud, whatever, or even down to the technologies, the models that you're using. What is your risk profile for the whole of that? Because it's all one ecosystem, and it's not going to help you that you have one set of policies and products to do security in the network and another on the cloud. You've got to think of this far more holistically, and I think that's where that's where operators that have enterprise businesses, I think, would benefit if they tried to sort of bring things together in a coherent narrative for enterprises, to stop this fragmentation and just thinking, well, I can get a little percentage there and a little percentage here, but actually this is one big service that we're going to do. We're going to provide you with secure physical critical infrastructure, resilient critical infrastructure. What does that look like? How much are you prepared to pay for that? What are the elements that you're prepared to pay for? Do you want sovereign cloud? Do you want GPU as a service with a particular country-specific large language model, etc., etc.? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, and I think that's really goes into sort of an even bigger kind of thing, because the whole idea of having silos and having and this and everything is fragmented. It's not just in security that doesn't work. It's in sort of a general issue, right? Yeah. So the thing is that how should we think about it? Because clearly we need to change. But the thing is that so operators need to change first, because they have their own silos, and then they're selling to the enterprise who has their own silos. Now, when you think about automation and AI, are breaking down the silos, because you cannot have efficient. I mean, the impact of automation and AI comes as long as you're able to go beyond the silos, this kind of fragmentation, and not just for security. So I wonder whether this is kind of even it's holistic, not just with respect to security, but respect of the service. So the service would include security as part of it, and then you can have different level of service, so to say. But the security becomes part of the service rather than an add-on. Because when you think about it, it should be in the same way that you want to have an SLA to guarantee access, you should have security should just be another dimension of it, rather than a separate product. or
Mm.
it could be a separate product for specific things like, quantum keys. But in general, it might be that, it's just sort of built in. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think so, but you'd want levels of guarantees and capabilities. But as you say, if you have a platform approach, you can switch things on and off and say, well, this is what I want, what I want it to look like. But there are also other there are other sort of auditing things that might need to be done. So, for example, you might want to understand what are the what are the security, what are the security capabilities like in case of submarine cable failures and things like that. I think these are quite well known, what are your resilience levels and that kind of thing. But I think there's going to be a lot more attention paid to them, and possibly even, are you a member of a Project Glasswing? So do you have early visibility of the Mythos model, so that you can start, probing for vulnerabilities in whatever software you've got in place. That there's, just like you've got some kind of, what's the word? What's the term? The the sustainability. There are different levels of sustainability that you can adhere to. Maybe there are different levels to what you're expecting across your supply chain, because it's not just the network. It's actually and what the network's doing, but actually the technologies within the network, that the technology that's built on, that there may need to be some kind of auditing that you want to do right the way back, as an enterprise, in order to get us, to make sure that you're as secure as possible. I don't know, I'm rambling now, Monica, so this may not make any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think we need to ramble a little bit more to kind of comes to terms, because it's a really big change in the way we really even think about security and service provisioning. The whole issue about resilience, for instance, is linked to security, but it used not to.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly.
there
My
is a
point.
different, and I guess security is not just bad actors. There's all sorts of vulnerabilities out there.
Yes,
And I think that
yeah.
sometimes, like, this is especially in the US, that there is often a sense that geopolitical tension is a lot of cause of security issues, which clearly it is. But at the same time, I think that there is a potential risk of saying, well, it's all geopolitical and therefore impossible or hard to control, where it actually that's kind of like hiding the bigger problem, which is not just geopolitical. Or, well, that's not going to be, you're always going to have bad actors no matter what the geopolitical thing is. So just excluding Chinese vendors is just not going to fix any security issue.
No. And
But there is a sense that, you might gain, just feel like, oh, well, as long as we don't have dangerous vendors, we are fine. But that's not the case.
Well, I think this goes to the heart of why sovereignty has to be part of this discussion as well. So we're not just talking about, security and sovereignty are very strongly, and resilience are all very strongly interrelated. And I think, there's a lot of confusion in the market about what is sovereignty. Are we talking about data residency? Are we talking about data in transit? So routing, being able to have much more deterministic routing. I mean, we're used to the internet, it going anywhere, but now people actually want to know what routes their data is taking, and it's not always, there's a lack of awareness of how still a lack of awareness of how the internet works, just as there is with the way public cloud works. And it can pass data if you're just on the ordinary public cloud, you don't know where your data is going to end up necessarily. But is sovereignty, do you want, say, in Europe, all European technology, which is pretty difficult. How are we ever going to get that? The chips are not made here, the cloud technology. There are a couple of European native cloud technology companies, but most of the supply chain, most of the technology we use is US based, and increasingly from a very, very small number of companies, a vanishingly small number of companies, actually. And then, how do you, if you're how do you know that you've got a resilient supply chain, not just as an enterprise, enterprises are now sort of having to think about, well, does my supplier have access to rare earth metals, to chips, to people and experts, to the right AI models? I mean, it's actually quite a massive area. And so maybe you want to sort of offload some of that to a trusted critical infrastructure provider who is going to, secure that for you.
So, and what's the role here of just regulation? Because as you said, sovereignty, it's a big thing, very important. On the other hand, you don't want to overdo it. Because as you said, we depend in Europe, we depend on technology developed somewhere else. That is true, not just for Europe, it's true for the US, China, for everybody. So you cannot be 100% sovereign, and also you don't want to, because it's detrimental to the cause.
It's inefficient.
Because right now, everything that it's sovereign sounds good, but it doesn't have to. It really depends on what is that you're trying to do. So some level it's good, don't go overboard. But isn't there a risk that we are going overboard and then limit our ability to secure our networks?
I think that's another, to be honest, that's another opportunity, a revenue generating opportunity, to understand where you need it and where you don't, where you need sovereignty, where you need quantum, post-quantum cryptography, where you need very high levels of security, and where you don't, where you can get away with it. And this is a risk management function. As I say, going right back to when I was writing that report, and I realized that people were going to do risk management and decide, actually, we're only going to spend X amount of budget, and we take the risk that we're going to get these vulnerabilities are going to get exploited. I think there's as you say, things have changed. Now there's a need to, I think, reevaluate that all over again. So there's a consulting opportunity here, if you like, to help enterprises understand, and even some consumers understand, where you need protection and where it is actually going overboard. So I think we're at a point in the market where we're seeing these new services emerge, and they're emerging for very good reasons, because of this new era of radical uncertainty, because of these new realizations, that it's going to be critically important to protect the infrastructure that your whole business and in fact your life runs on. But obviously there has to be some kind of risk management, because nobody's got the money to pay for everything you need to be 100% secure, and you can never be 100% secure, and it's also economically inefficient. So yeah, I think there's an opportunity to understand what really is going to be particularly critical to apply sovereignty to, or any of these new technologies.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely spot on, in the sense that I'm not a security expert, but it's pretty obvious that people out there, both on the across the ecosystem, so operators, vendors, and the enterprise, still have somewhat fuzzy ideas of what, I mean, everybody would say security is top priority, but then when you start digging down, you understand that it is a top priority, but you don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So that there is a need to to help people out to understand what is that they need to do, because obviously the more security you have, the more tools to ensure security, the more complexity, the more, I mean, ideally you don't want to be dealing with it because it adds work, cost, complexity, and potential problems too. So you need to find the right level at which you're gonna address the issue, and then, as we were talking before, do you do it at the network level, application level, or where do you how do you deal with the silos, the organizational structure? Well, organizational structure and budgeting. How is it that the organizations assign budget? So that's all kind of new stuff. So it's all complicated. But let me ask you sort of a sort of final question as we sort of went on. You mentioned individual users. So that's also something where operators have been in the past have tried to do, you get more security, you get protection if you pay something more, and it just never really worked. Even though when you think about it, it's so painful. You use your phone and you got all those, you have to be careful about everything. There's a lot of things that you'd imagine people are willing to pay a little bit to be protected, but doesn't seem to be working that way. Do you think that that's going to change?
Probably not, because I look at my own consumer behavior and I'm really bad at it, even though, I've sort of written reports and so on security. I think though that we have what we haven't talked about, and obviously this is probably a topic for another day, but particularly for consumers, what we're about to be hit with is the whole agentic commerce world.
Yes.
And that is going to open a massive can of worms, quite apart from the fact of, if certificates fail, how do we, everyone's a dog on the internet, but at least we've got some forms of authentication today. But I think it would be very interesting to see what levels of identity fraud we're going to get, what unintended consequences of agent-to-agent communication we're going to get. And again, that reckoning might trigger, or it's bound to trigger, to be honest, is bound to trigger new product opportunities, new service opportunities. And just as and I think already we're seeing that we're all paying that much more for our connectivity. I don't think it's going to be too big a stretch, because connectivity, people can't live without it now. Again, critical infrastructure. And people would prefer to pay for their mobile phones than their heating. They'll sit swaddled up in blankets to play their video games as long as they've got the internet. I don't see that I think there is an opportunity to put a security premium on that if it's going to fix some of those problems that I can foresee coming with agentic commerce.
Yeah, actually, I was just thinking that I did recently another podcast on Stayed in Italy, which is the digital ID government-run service, and now they're planning to charge for it. It's not much money. It would be like I don't know, $5-10 a year, so it's not really expensive. But it's also the kind of thing, your digital ID, it's really important because that allows you to access all sorts of government services.
Absolutely.
And the question is that should the government pay for it or not? But anyway, forget about whether the government should pay for it or not. But I think it's going to be an interesting case to see if people are willing to pay even a small amount for something that protects them.
Yes.
And again, the question is that going to be something that is an operator that can make money off, or in this case, it's actually financial institutions?
Well,
So
financial institutions are already doing that. I think
yeah,
there's a very good system in Sweden, for example,
yeah,
which is a good model. Um, or is it going to be the hyperscalers,
exactly. So the
which is
question, I guess, is, you know, if there is a market, who is going to make the revenues? Who is going to be able to reach the consumers and get their money? So
but and then we do then it's going to be extremely important for telcos if they want to retain, they are trusted brands, but the NPS scores are low. You actually need to be a trusted brand with high NPS, and then I think you're in with a real chance.
yeah, and also you need to be in a position to offer protection across everything you do.
Yeah.
So, for instance, when you use the digital ID, you use digital ID across devices. So it wouldn't make sense for me to pay an operator because I might be using a different operator and I not always use mobile. So when I'm on Wi-Fi, it doesn't work. So anyway, Caroline, thank you so much. This was a good discussion. I think we should have an update soon to see what's happening because this is something that is everything is changing so quickly.
Indeed. Well, lovely to talk to you, Monica. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, and thank you all to in the audience for listening to us. I hope you found it useful, and if so, let your friends know about it.